Good day, gentlemen. What is going on with society? Like, we've witnessed a complete collapse of spiritual values. We've seen the breakdown of the family. We've seen the breakdown in spirituality. We've seen laziness. We've witnessed so much of what we consider to be, at the very least, wasted potential. Males make up 59% of high school dropouts, 20% more likely than women to drop out of college as well. Men make up 90% of the prison local jail population. They have an imprisonment rate that is 14 times higher than that of women. We've also seen several mass shootings around the time that this was filmed. So there seems to be an issue, an emotional, spiritual imbalance in society. What do we do about that? Well, the first step begins with all of you. Now, when you see something that's a monolith, when you see a building that seems inconceivably large, like the Great Pyramid, for example, each one of those 2.3 million limestone and granite blocks were moved into position by people with a lot of willpower. No matter how difficult something seems, every step starts with that single brick. So perhaps all of you guys are if you're listening, you're perhaps listening out of curiosity. Perhaps you've already built something. Perhaps you're in despair, and perhaps you're on the way to building something. Just remember, everything starts with a single brick. And historians believe that it took decades, perhaps 20 to 30 years, to build the Great Pyramid. Perhaps your missions may take decades as well. Stay the course and do not quit. But we'll get back to that point later. So when we're talking about being a man, now I think a lot of people equate that with being macho. So let us try to break this down a little bit right now. What does it mean to be tough, in your opinion, gentlemen? What does it mean to be a man?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I start by saying toughness is just durability. Being able to withstand the trials that life throw your way and keep on pressing. But I don't know.
No, I agree. There has to be a certain level of resilience as well. Being tough, I think people as coaches, I think sometimes when we hear people say, you got to be tough, there's a certain gender assignment, like men are tough. But in my experience as a coach, sometimes girls and women are tougher psychologically and physically than men. So it's important that when we talk about tough, and especially on a show where we're speaking to the problems of men in society, that we don't exclude anyone from the meaning of tough. So it's obvious we've been dealt a certain position in society as well, and we have to bear responsibility for that.
Yeah, I think the first thing I think about when I think about being tough is being resilient. Just being able to bounce back from any situation, because it's not how you move when everything's going well. It's how you respond. So your attitude when you have to respond to something, you just it's that grit, that inner grit. Like, that's one of those buzzwords that people use and people actually make money off of. Yeah. Just having that grit of being just resilient, and I'm glad you mentioned that. There's not a role or a gender role that is assigned to that, because I think we coach. And we've seen through coaching females and males that there's no gender role assigned to toughness. So being tough, especially as it relates to men, I think just being resilient. This world throws a lot at men. It throws a lot of it specifically at men. So if we're going to talk about from that perspective, I think just being resilient and being able to push through and being able to persevere in times when you don't want to.
Absolutely.
So that's toughness to me.
Yeah, amen. And it's obvious, I don't think this can be very much debated, that a lot of the problems, if not most of the problems in society are caused by men, whether directly or indirectly. So what do we do? What do we say to those men who are in a state where they don't think they have a choice, where they feel the need to act out and to do stupid things, to turn to substance rather than the spirit? We've seen the prominence of weak men in society. We've seen petty acts of injustice. We've seen mass murder. We've seen governments dropping bombs on civilians. And all of these are the direct result of the issues of men. Why can't we just get along?
The sons of men. The sons of men. The sons
So
of
what do we say to those guys who they feel inclined to do something? They find it in their best interest to do something stupid. And what do we say to those men?
It's a good question.
Yeah, we say, I started meeting with men a little while ago. I used to meet with this group all the time. And we be talking about, all of our struggles in our marriages and our relationships and our jobs. And I had this phrase called, be a man. I always say that to guys, be a man. And I think you have to break down what that means in this society, what it means to be a man, because we're fed so many different things through media, through social media, through songs, through movies. You're fed this image of what it looks like to be a man. And you have to break that down to what we talked about earlier, like being tough, like taking your responsibilities seriously, holding yourself accountable to being a leader, not only in your family, but in your community, in the spaces of influence that you have. We're all leaders in our own rights. So we have to take those leadership opportunities very seriously, especially when it pertains to being a father and a husband. You have to take those things seriously. You have to lead those areas that God gives you in a strong way. And not a way of not strong, like I say, of being domineering or just lording yourself over people.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to be gentle.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you have to be the lion in the lamb, So at times when it takes a firm hand, you got to be firm. At times when it takes a gentle hand, when you need to pat somebody on the back and tell them it's okay, when you need to pick your children up, when you need to be a loving husband, when you need to be a stern boss, or when you need to reinforce a person. We have to learn in time that doesn't always take being a manly man, being John Wayne and coming to a situation and smacking somebody when it takes a gentle hand. So we need to learn to deal with people appropriately and not just look at what society tells us about being a man and say, that's what it takes. Let's be a man in that way. Because if we do that, we know we're missing the mark.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think you make a great point with that. You got to be able to be dynamic as a man. I think you do have to have moments where you're gentle, moments where you're firm. That's something that's I'll be just in my experience, honestly, it's been hard to navigate a little bit. Especially when I was younger, I really tried to avoid conflict and. So I think that's a pretty common thing for people. They'll bend one way or the other. They'll have an easier time, being firm, or have an easier time being gentle. For example. But it's so important, and I think that's something that's missing today for sure. Grit, toughness, all those things are important as well. As you guys mentioned, and. Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
So obviously, great points here. We're speaking to the woes of society. It seems like through the wisdom of the ancients that humanity has been dealing with these issues for thousands of years. I mean, if you look at the text, if you look at the word throughout various religions, various scriptures, you see that it seems, at least in my view, that they're speaking to men. You look at the law, the Torah, the Ten Commandments. By and large, regardless of what culture you find yourself in, you look at the Ten Commandments, it is an attempt to standardize behavior in society. Because if you're going around killing people, committing adultery, in their case, worshiping other gods, we have the example of the golden calf. Obviously, if you're stealing, you're creating tumult, you're creating issues in society. So it seems that our forefathers, so to speak, have been trying to instill this upon society as well. We talked about the Torah, the Quran as well. There's a whole chapter called Anisa, which means the women, and it talks about how men should treat women in terms of inheritance, in terms of other types of marital relations as well. We are not the first people to have this idea. So how did we get so far away from that? And why are we so inclined to ignore, or to consider the wisdom of the ancients to be outdated?
Man, that's a great question you posed to us. I think you go back to that that phrase I mentioned, be a man, and I think being a man started to change over time. At first, when we had all of these ancient texts that you were mentioning, they were speaking to men. So it wasn't taboo to speak to men. If
Yes.
we were meant to be the leaders in our home through the beginning of time. It was instructed to the first human being in record to be a man, to be the leader, to be a strong leader. Over time, I think that has eroded. You can even go to popular television and look at the man and how the man's role has changed in popular TV shows. It once went from a man who was upstanding and he came in the house with a suit and tie on, and just that image of a man in a suit and tie brought you to that realization that this guy's serious.
Right.
And then all of a sudden he became a little bit more of a jokester and a little bit more weak and a little bit more subservient to his wife. And all of a sudden the man is in his home in a TV show is like a goofball.
Raymond. Ha 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 ha!
Exactly.
Exactly. So even looking at popular TV and popular media, we see that the role of the man in that. This is what the role of a man is. And now, I mean, it's an over popularized view, but at the same time, there's always some truth in it.
Yeah.
And there's always some truth being sent into the mind of a man. It's like, oh, that's cool. I'm just, my parents and my kids are doing whatever, and that's cool. My wife is, talking to me this way in front of people. That's cool. She's disrespecting our relationship. That's cool. That's all right. And I think even through that view, it's just kind of eroded over time and just what the definition of a man is, and we've kind of accepted it. It's cool not to be strong.
Yeah.
and I think that's really like seeping to the mind of man, and we're like, okay, we can just let things go, and it's
over time. Yeah, it just seeps into your subconscious, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Just being a human being, you need to be tough. You need tenacity, especially a man. Like we talked about the political, the social hand we've been dealt. And obviously our impact is, it can't be understated.
Yeah. Especially, your impact in society, especially the male impact in society. Like we can speak on this for days in different areas and peel back layers and all that stuff. But at the core of that, it's like who are we made to be and who are we supposed to be?
Yeah.
And how are we holding ourselves accountable and holding each other accountable?
I think
being those things.
I think we're just disconnected. I mean, there's many layers to this. I think.
Yeah.
I think. We're just disconnected. Like if I'm gonna just I'll be honest. I mean, I'm gonna shoot for the deepest layer I can here. I think that we're disconnected. From the source of our strength. Not to relate things personally, but just as I as I've grown up and as I've grown into a man, from a boy into a man, I think. Trying to navigate that's a really, really hard thing to navigate, and I think that's why these ancient texts they speak to men to try to help to navigate you from boyhood into manhood, and you got to have a connection to your Creator in order to do that.
Amen.
Because what I found was that when I was trying to do it, I would try to neurotically control things. Oh, does this girl like me? I would be up in my head with it.
Yeah.
There's really nothing you have to do to be a man. You just relax into it. Just kind of relax into it. That's what the conclusion that I've come. It shouldn't be this neurotic thing. When we're connected, it doesn't have to be this neurotic thing. We can just relax into it. The birds don't have to be oh, how do I be a bird? How do I be a how do I be a flower? How do I be? They just are that.
Yeah.
And I found that once I just submitted to that higher power, then all of a sudden,
Amen.
like I wasn't so I wasn't having the same trouble that I was having before.
Yeah.
Absolutely, you do. There has to be a connection, at least in our view. Now, I think we'll let the cat out of the bag. We are Christians, so we're speaking about Jesus. Yeah, I mean, maybe, I guess from a certain point of view, it could be possible to instill morality and emotional balance in yourself if you're not a spiritual person. But it's just weird how the values of people who are agnostic or atheist tend sometimes to align with Judeo-Christian values.
Oh man, it's amazing.
Of course, they would just say that it's just called being a good person, but I don't know. It just seems that we're getting too far away. And and we'll speak on relationships at some point as well. But women have the ultimate power to reject a man.
Yeah.
Like that is a power in society that has been making men self-conscious for thousands of years. You know, and we are
Great point.
in that case where we are a much higher functioning being. We're a much higher functioning animal, but we are animals in that respect as well. So we do have the way we can sit and talk about it is what makes us different than the animals.
Amen.
What does it mean to be a loser? Yes, a very subjective statement. Obviously, because from a certain point of view, someone could say that we're losers for doing what we're doing. What does it mean to be a loser? And would society benefit from fewer losers?
Yes.
Let's chime in here.
Society would benefit from fewer losers. You know, it's a great thing in this world to compete. You know, I'm a coach, so I teach competition, and in teaching competition, you know, you the first thing you teach is yes, it is important to win. You know, because they keep score for a reason.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's hard to teach non-competitive people, to coach non-competitive people, because it's easier to coach someone who's uber competitive and say, hey, you toned it down.
Yeah.
But I think it's an important thing to win in this world, because if not, then we wouldn't be given these gifts and these talents to put on display. You know, for in our case, it's for the kingdom. You know, if we're going to compete for the kingdom, then we got to compete to win. Right. You know, that's biblical. So I think it's very important to in our lives and as human beings, it's very important to not discredit winning, but in a proper context. You know, so I tell, you know, my teams and individuals that I coach, you know, if either you win or you learn.
Absolutely.
You know, either you win or you learn. So there's no room to be looking at yourself as a loser. You know, if you failed and you learn, you have an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to fail forward. You know, so if you view yourself as a loser, you know, people, it only comes from perspective. Yeah. Right. If you're a winner in your mind, then you only competing to win. That's all you're competing to do. You're competing to beat yourself. You know, you guys were teammates in a sport, and I'll let Devin speak to that. But you know, you're in a sport where getting better is the thing. You know, when you're running, it's all about getting better. It's true. Beating yourself. So how can you lose? You know, so yeah, perspective for me. Perspective is huge in that. And if you perceive yourself as a winner, then that's what you are. Being connected to that source. Yeah. Being connected to the creator. That's key. You know, how can you lose? Right.
Yeah, perspective, expectation, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, how would you guys speak to that?
Yeah, I think first things I would say is that, you know, I'm gonna raise my right hand and say I've been a loser in my life. We've all been a loser at some point. You know, we've all had, I like that. We've all had moments where we've lost. You know, let's just. From an athletic standpoint, there were times where, you know, I'd be dead last in a race. Yeah. You know, I mean, dead last, I'm talking. And then there were times where, like, the next year I came back and I would be the first. Yeah. You know? So I think, you know, life is kind of, it's polarized in that way. Like you have moments where you're on the mountaintops, and then moments when you're in when you're deep in the valley too. But I think kind of acknowledging the fact that there's going to be moments in your life where we lose, like, and saying that, like, and like being okay with that, but saying like the goal is always to be, is to win, like you said, and not for like our own egotistical sort of game, but for like that higher purpose.
Yeah.
When I'm working, like when I'm in the hospital, I'll be honest with you, there's times where, I make mistakes, and there's times where like I'll be presenting a case and I'll mess it up, and in my mind I'll be like, oh, you're a loser. Like my mind will be like, oh, like I'll get that mind, like you like have that voice in your head where you're like, like I fudged up, like you're so stupid. But like knowing to kind of silence that and be like, hey, like, how what has really, really helped me has like been, being connected to God. Like how does God see me, as a champion? So it's, like that I'm able to just like quickly, slip the jab, and then I'm like I'm back on it. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, like perspective, expectation. Like if we compare ourselves to people whom we define in our parameters of success, like Bill Gates, we say if that's your idea of success, then obviously we're all losers.
Good point.
And then there's a loser from the perspective of someone who's a lowlife. But I think they can be, like I said, there are very few people who get so far down a road of despair that they can't be talked out of it if they have the right support systems. What do we say to, all right, so if there's people out there listening that they're in a rut, and we just give a great perspective on just keep on hammering, keep on grinding. What is the difference between ceasing to do an activity because it's of its futility and quitting? When we say never quit, we can't, I don't expect anyone to interpret that literally. What's the difference between ceasing an activity that's a waste of time and quitting, and how do you know? Because that probably is the reason why people are losing their shit.
Yeah.
So that's another layer to that question. When you say, what does it mean to be a loser?
Yeah.
So what does it mean to be a loser? Not having tried.
Absolutely.
To win, So it's like I go back to that point. Like, it's important to compete in this world. It's important.
Yeah.
Whatever agenda that you're trying to push forward. So back again, in our cases, it's a kingdom agenda.
Right.
So if we're seeking God's kingdom to be done on this earth as it is in heaven, then that's what we're competing for. And we know what we're competing for. You know what I'm saying? So we're trying every day. We get up every day and we're trying to be 1% better. Right? Exactly. If you don't try your best, then how can you stop doing something? So that goes to that question right there. Like, how can we know when we're quitting something? How can we know when we're done? When you're done, you give it everything that you can give.
Absolutely.
If you're not done and you haven't given everything you can give and you just move on, you can label that a loser. Right. You can label that I've lost because I didn't even try.
Right.
If you willingly lose, I think you can put an ER on the end.
Yeah.
So you can,
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know. I don't want to label anybody a loser, but at that point, though, you've labeled yourself a loser.
Right.
If you haven't even tried to move forward, especially if you have the ability to do it.
Yeah.
Especially if God is giving you a gift in this area, and you're just like, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to get this talent and bury it in the ground.
Right.
Determination.
Yeah. Okay, so just to kind of run it back. So the key is to remember we all have a winner in us. That's the key. Like, we all have a winner in us from the source, right? That's the most important thing to like be in touch with, I think. So as far as quitting, never quit. Never quit. You can cease an activity, but never ever quit. Like I think that's my philosophy on it. So for example, you can table an activity. Say you've been working on a business, you've been working on some sort of like
venture,
any sort of venture. Yeah, like you're writing or you're an artist. there may be a time where, like you're moved in a different direction spiritually, and you're working on other endeavors, kind of letting the other things kind of digest and work through.
Well, I'll just piggyback on what you said,
Yeah.
because you're just saying, you're talking to determination. You're speaking about determination,
Yeah.
which is an essential part of winning, or however you define success. We are here because our ancestors succeeded.
Absolutely.
They succeeded genetically, reproducing. They succeeded socially,
Yeah.
at least in providing enough food, sustenance for their family to survive past the life expectancies in the past, which were not good numbers. And we are a result of success. We are a result of winning. And what you're speaking to is determination itself, at least how I interpreted it.
Yeah.
You can't give up. You can get off. You can change lanes, perhaps. You can change lanes, but
Yes.
you can't just say,
You can't ever
I'm
give
done.
up, yeah.
Because when people give up, they start loathing themselves. And self-loathing,
Absolutely.
depression, anxiety, and then we're getting into trying to mask, sedate yourself with substance.
Yeah.
Then substance becomes your success, and then substance becomes your God.
So yeah, I mean, from a scientific perspective, imagine if at the point of conception, the sperm that was going to fertilize the egg just gave up. I wouldn't be here. Sherrod wouldn't be here. Sorry, Devin wouldn't be here. Like there is no giving up. You always have that spirit of I can do this, but you can table certain activities, certain endeavors for a time, or maybe like you never return to it, but you never lose that spirit of like I'm gonna try to win.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try to win. That's what it is.
Like peeling back that layer of tabling something. So finishing something, you always finish something that you started with a purpose. You go back to starting, and I'll just touch on this. I won't mess with this too much, but a lot of people start things they should never have started.
That's true.
When we talking about giving something, you ceasing to do an activity because it's futile. Sometimes it's futile because that's the way it started, and something in your mind, maybe an outside factor, maybe there was some kind of outside force pushing you to do something, and you fell victim to that. You're like, oh, all my friends are going over here. You fell victim to some kind of peer pressure, or some kind of pressure to start something that you should never have started. Me, I know. I've been there.
Yeah.
I went down roads that I heard the voice in my head say, don't go. I'm like, hey, it looks good. I'm going to go anyway. And you go down that road, and you get halfway down that road, and you're like, I should have never went this way. Now, that's wisdom.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a time when wisdom comes into play and tells you, the earth was formed by wisdom.
Right.
It says that in God's word. So it's like sometime when you get that wisdom to know that you're going down the wrong road, you got to turn around.
That's a good point.
You got to turn around. So at that point, we're not talking about losing at that point. We're talking about wisdom. We're talking about you being wise to the fact that, man, I made a mistake.
Right.
I messed this up.
It's
And I'm going to continue to mess this up if
Right.
I continue to walk down this road.
Yeah.
So you have to. That's discernment, having wisdom to know that I should not continue this path. That's discernment,
Right.
and that's a godly trait that we all need to tap into a little bit more. Say, yeah, I'm not a loser if I'm quitting this thing.
Right.
Sometimes people like, I don't give up. I never give up. Well, you should never have went that way.
Right.
Turn around and go back.
That's a great point.
Yeah, so that's just another layer on that one. It goes into another topic, but at the same time, it speaks to being a loser
Yeah.
and not being a loser.
Yeah.
Now, how do we reconcile our mistakes? So mistakes are what drive people to self-loathing as well. Obviously, from a Christian perspective, we have certain opinions on reconciliation of our faults, our shortcomings, our mistakes. In other words, our sin. So how do we reconcile our mistakes? How do we speak to people who are in a situation where they cannot overcome the guilt of something, whether something minor or something major?
Ooh,
It's a good question.
ooh, my man, I have something I posted on social media probably about 5 or 6 times. Man's problem is sin. So
Yep.
when you start to figure out that whatever my sin is not different from your sin. Mm-hmm. So there's no mistakes that are bigger than someone else's mistakes. Mm-hmm. Like when we get caught up on the thing that we've done, we start to forget that we're human beings. Mm-hmm. When you start to measure, so you spoke to that earlier about comparing yourself to Bill Gates. Okay, well, is his mistake worse than yours, or is his mistake better than yours? You start to put your mistake on the table with somebody else and start comparing them. Everything that person did is in you because they're a human being.
Yeah.
So one, you can't take yourself too seriously, and two, you can't say, well, my mistake is way worse than that person. Mm-hmm. So when you start to view yourself from that perspective, from a sober-minded perspective, mm-hmm. then you're able to see, yeah, I made a mistake, instead of looking at yourself as there's no way I can come back from this.
Yeah.
Because I'm such a bad person, or I'm such a loser, that I went this wrong way and I can't come back from it. Yeah. Mistakes are meant to be made. We're meant to fail to move forward as human beings, or we would never need a higher power. We would never need to submit ourselves unto a creator, or to a source.
Right.
As you call it, if we were perfect. None of us are perfect. We're going to make mistakes. So I think in order, to get past that, we got to know that we're going to screw up.
Right. I would say, and again, from a Christian perspective, like, guilt is forgiven through our Creator. Mm-hmm. And through Christ, from my perspective, Mm-hmm. So and I didn't grow up Christian, so for a long, long, long time, I had a lot of guilt. That was really holding me back in life and really causing me a lot of suffering. That was manifesting itself. I mean, if we really want to go deep, it was manifesting itself physically too. Mm-hmm. Being able to let go of that guilt. And I think guilt kind of lives in your subconscious, mm-hmm. If we're talking about it from a psychological perspective, but being able to let go of that guilt, it frees your mind up. It frees your, you're more creative, you have more strength to endure hardship, to endure, you have more, you all of a sudden have a stronger source of grit. So thank God for that, because, for a long, long time, I felt a lot of shame and guilt. And I think a lot of young men feel this shame and this guilt that comes from many different, no matter what, it doesn't matter what time you live in, mm-hmm. you're gonna, there's going to be mm-hmm. some source of shame and guilt. I think nowadays there's this anti-male sort of, narrative that I can say, for me personally, made me feel a lot of guilt. I was like, wow, am I this bad person just because I didn't ask to be born male? I don't know. I mean, I just was born,
Society, they're trying to redress grievances.
Right, and I felt shame. I felt a ton of shame.
Yeah, we're not to blame for. I mean, they're speaking about real issues when they're attacking men. I mean, we started this show by attacking men, but it's not everybody.
Right,
and you're right. I think it's made people self-conscious. Just being a man,
and that's I think no matter what, you're regardless of what time you're living, that you live in, if you live in the 1100s or you live now, there's going to be some source of shame and guilt, right? Mm-hmm. But when you're connected and you're in alignment, all of a sudden your mind is free, your subconscious is free of that, and it's like night and day. Mm-hmm. So,
amen. We've talked a lot about problems in society as they have to do with men. I think when we're going back and talking about how to create stronger men in this society, we have to start with integrity. And creating a stronger society and creating stronger men, you have to have a strong foundation. And just going through, speaking from my perspective, my foundational text mm-hmm. is found in a book called Proverbs. And Proverbs 3 is probably my most favorite book in the Bible, Proverbs 3. I could go through that. I've been going through it lately, and I can go through it all day. But even on my chain and even on my cups and shirts, I got this thing all over my life. It's Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. That is my foundational text in my life. And I think if we're speaking about integrity and as it have to do with men, we have to start with what is our foundation.
Mm.
You know, I used to, for a small time in my life, I worked construction. And we were building a strip mall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I say we loosely. I barely knew what I was doing out there. I was out there breaking rocks and doing whatever they wanted me to do. One of my friends owned the company. God bless him. He overpaid me for being out there. But we spent the most time laying the foundation, measuring the foundation, making sure it was deep enough, making sure it was level enough, making sure it wasn't leaning to one way or another. If there was a problem with that foundation, we had to go back to the beginning and fix it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like, hey, foundation is a little bit off, man. Let's move on with everything else. Like, we spent the most time laying the concrete. Mm-hmm. Everything else, I mean, we use foam, we use all this other stuff. We use rebars to reinforce the walls. Yeah. But none of that stuff started until that foundation was secure. Mm-hmm. And I think in this world, when we talk about having integrity, we talk about having something that does not move. We're talking about having something that's immovable, strong enough to uphold your values in this world. I heard a pastor one time say you need to have a pain plan. Mm-hmm. So in times when you're strong, you need to make a plan to have in times when you're weak. Yeah. Because when you're weak in this world, that's when you're attacked. And if you're already trying to think of something to do when you're weak, you're at your most vulnerable point, you can't think about it at that point. So having integrity in this world is having a strong foundation. Mm-hmm. and being open enough with yourself, being vulnerable enough to yourself to say, these are areas where I'm weak, what needs to be my foundation. Mm-hmm. And going back, speaking from my perspective, trust in the Lord with all your heart speaks to where I'm weak. Because the area of trust, mm-hmm. you know, I can go back into my childhood and all this other stuff, but trust is a big thing for me. Trust is the biggest part of love for me. I need to be able to trust mm-hmm. who you are and what you're going to do in my life, if it's positive or negative. Yeah. So going to my values and my foundations, I need to be able to trust that this is the right value for me. Yeah. This is the right foundation for me. And how does this keep me in line with everything else in my life? Mm-hmm. So trusting in the Lord and not leaning on my own understanding is something very important, because the heart is a wicked thing, as in context to, you know, speaking from scripture, mm-hmm. from the Bible, you know, the heart can lead you in all different directions. But when you submit yourself to a cause greater than you are, you know, we can speak to any human being on this earth. You get outside of yourself. Submit yourself to a greater cause. At some point, you stop thinking about yourself. Facts. Start thinking about Facts. How does what I do affect the greater good? Yeah. And how does what I do affect somebody else? Yeah. Now you start to move forward and you have something on which to stand on. Mm-hmm. These are my values. This is my value. So I think when we're talking about creating stronger men, mm-hmm. creating a stronger society, creating stronger families, all of these things need to start with integrity. What do I have inside of me? How can you see my values, right? It's when you see your values at play, that tends to be what a person's character is. Yeah. But you're just seeing what their integrity is. Like when you see a person's character, that had to start in them. And that had to start with each one of us doing the work on ourselves. Mm-hmm. So when we do the work on ourselves, and we find that value system, find something that does not move in times of peril. Like, this can never move in my life. If I can always go back to trusting the Lord. Yeah. With all my heart. I can always go back to not leaning on my own understanding. So that's a foundational text for me, and that's where my integrity stems from. You know, that's why the scripture is my foundation. All scripture, my perspective, it comes back to Proverbs 3:5, and it starts there. And I can see God in that, and I can feel God in that. I can feel Christ in that, and then I can project that out to the world. And somebody can ask me, "What's your foundation?" And I can tell them, without a question, this is my foundation. So I think when we're talking about going back to creating stronger men, creating stronger society, creating stronger families, we have to have integrity and we have to have a foundation, a strong foundation.
Yeah.
So just lending my voice to that conversation, that's why I would start. I would start there. And I would end there.
Yeah.
I would start in there.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate that, Shroud. That's like, I think it's a great point you made, like, about the house. You have to build the foundation first, and then what's funny is, if, let's say, you start building the house on a foundation that's not correct. Like, say that, like, the measurements are a little bit off. You start building the house, all of a sudden we're like, oh, this thing's not going to make it, like, past 6 months or a year. Then you got to go back. You got to dismantle everything and kind of rebuild it up. And I think most men in the world can probably, like, relate to that. And there's been times where we've gone in, like, it's like you go in a direction, all of a sudden you got to pivot and go in. You got to kind of backtrack, and then go in a different direction. You've got to go back. You got to adjust the foundation and then build it up again. And you lose time, like when you have to do that. And when you're connected to God, to Christ, I mean, like, all of a sudden you have, like, this just rock solid, like, the measurements are on point, you know what I'm saying? And there's not all this backtracking and time wasting that, like, may have gone on before. That's
gotta stay the course.
That's what I found. But
That speaks to how hard it is, though.
it is. It's
Well,
hard.
life is hard.
Yeah.
We are. I mean, like I said, we are a separate class from the animals. Like I have 2 dogs and 2 cats. I don't expect them to have the higher thinking skills or to really be aware of things the way we're aware of things. Life is tough.
Yeah.
Obviously, in the West, we have it a lot better than many places in the world. But we also have issues. So even the most, like, you can say, the silver spoon, the rich, the powerful, all the way down to the working class, the working poor, everybody's got issues. And if we lean ourselves to a higher power, if we do not consider ourselves to be alone in this world, then we are better off. So tenacity, durability, belief,
Yeah.
determination, and success.